So it's a huge myth that most hospitals are making lots of money.
It's a huge myth. And if somebody's looking at their overall margin and they see maybe they're in the positive, but if they look deeper, so now they have investments, fundraising, other revenue sources, and they say, look, they're making just a ton of money. The reality is, just like you and I, we have to make a margin in our operations. That should be the goal. And great, fundraising and all those other things like investments or security, capital, just all other reasons why you would want that. But the goal is to have a positive operating margin from operations. That's key.
Welcome to the Healthcare Leadership Experience, a place where healthcare leaders will share proven strategies and innovative approaches to leading the clinical and business side of healthcare. This show is sponsored by Vi Healthcare Consulting, who has proudly helped hospitals save over $700 million in non-labor costs since 1999. Here's your host, Lisa Miller, founder and CEO of Vi Healthcare.
Hello, this is Lisa Miller with the Healthcare Leadership Experience, and I'm here again with Lisa Larter, who's our show's producer. Welcome, Lisa, to a discussion about cost aware for patient care.
Looking forward to it.
That's great. So there's a lot of misunderstanding, I believe, about hospital costs versus revenue a hospital makes. So over the last 22 years, when I've been working with frontline team members in hospitals and talking about costs, a lot of times I've heard things like, well, it really doesn't matter. We get paid by case, or we get paid by a bundle. And I continue to hear these things to today. And, I know that hospitals talk about cost savings and margin improvement, but I think there's a big misunderstanding thinking that hospitals make a ton of money. I hear that so much from vendors, but I hear it often. And it got me thinking like, okay, how do we support hospitals in, bringing in together their people and making them have a cost aware culture? And for the goal is for patient care. They're not doing this for any reason. No one's doing this for any other reason other than to support patients, support the physicians and the clinicians and their communities. So we came up with a program called Cost Aware for Patient Care. And we're not going to talk a lot about that program, but talk about the fringe, why it's so important that we have to give our team, the employees at the hospitals, a big vision to see the opportunities, all the opportunities, while giving them an understanding of the marketplace so they can be contributors in their hospital success. So what does that mean? The marketplace is very complex, right? So we have suppliers, GPOs, manufacturers, distributors. There's just all these different people, organizations that are part of the mix as it relates to cost. And, some costs are, unfortunately, they're in silos. Some costs are, outsourced physician agreements. So the physicians are providing like ED services or anesthesia services. So, there's all this complexity, and hospitals really have to be, I don't want to say transparent, but be educational in explaining to people. And frankly, there's some directors and even some leaders who I don't think understand fully the cost equation as it relates to the whole marketplace, right? Distributor markups, pharmacy potentially having a cost minus structure, or all those other things that relates to services. Services are performed, then invoice. Well, what does that mean for the organization? Who does our auditing of contracts? We don't what are our internal controls, or what does the marketplace do? What's going to happen in 2022? So this idea of education and pushing out education into their organization about, at least on the cost side, is so key. How costs map to reimbursement. Yes, Medicare gives specific DRGs, for inpatient cases. Managed care companies, maybe you make a little bit more, but these days, maybe not so much. But how does that work? Because you want them, again, to be contributors in this process for the organization's success. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a program called Cost Aware for Patient Care. And it starts with presentation to leadership first on hospital costs. We have a really great deck, and we go through the market and the shifts and where those opportunities are, and really understanding how really everything starts with a cost. But what does that mean from an item all the way through to billing? And it's a great presentation to have at a leadership meeting, because it really starts people thinking in ways that they have a different level of understanding so they can make changes or they can seek out new opportunities. Then we work with directors and all employees on presenting that cost-aware presentation. And it's all about educating the organization on costs and giving them insights they otherwise wouldn't. And it's not because anybody's lacking, but it's just being able to put this in a framework that gives them the education. And once someone's educated, they're never going to go back. They're going to see things differently in that light from then on. So we've had some great success with making those presentations because it's the entry point to better discussions, better thinking. And, there's 7 skills, and there's probably more, but, for the purpose of this show today, I think those are the 7 skills you need for margin improvement.
Before you dive into those 7 talking points, I have a couple questions for you. The first question I have for you is, in the years that you have been doing this, which I know since 1999, so you've been in this game a long time, what percentage of hospitals do you see making a lot of money versus hospitals that are losing a lot of money because they're not being charged appropriately?
It's a really great question. So I'm going to answer it in 2 ways. One is I'm doing some research now for a report, like an executive report, which may turn into a little skinny book. I'm not sure, but it's analyzing hospitals who have $1 billion in net patient revenue. And I wanted just to understand, from their Medicare cost report, are there any uniquenesses or anything I could see? So I think there are about, we'll say 300 hospitals or health systems that make over $1 billion or more in net patient revenue. So that's a very unique subspecialty, in the marketplace. And I wanted to see if they did some things differently. So what I found, and I don't have it right in front of me, but was interesting, it was 3 buckets, right? So there's high performers, the average, and then kind of lower performers. But I would say out of the 300, I believe there were only like 114 that out of operations, not from any other income. So out of operations were in a positive. And that positive, they had some that were higher, but there are some that were just squeaked in at like 0.01%. And then, you have the middle tier and the low tier. So it was fascinating. And I still am going through the data because I want to point out that a lot of these, even in the $1 billion club, we'll call it, a lot of them, most of them, I would say probably 70 to 80%. And I think this goes to the marketplace, from their operations are operating in a negative operating margin. And they make it up in other ways, fundraising or other outside investments or even outside ventures.
So it's a huge myth that most hospitals are making lots of money.
It's a huge myth. And if somebody's looking at their overall margin and they see, maybe they're in the positive, but if they look deeper, so now they have investments, fundraising, other revenue sources, and they say, look, they're making just a ton of money. The reality is, just like you and I, we have to make a margin in our operations. That should be the goal. And great, fundraising and all those other things like investments are, security, capital. It's just all other reasons why you would want that. But the goal is to have a positive operating margin from operations, right? Operation margin. That's key. It really is a myth.
And then my second question, you talked about your cost aware for patient care program and how it starts with a presentation to leadership. Do you do a presentation to leadership before they actually engage your services for the program, or is that presentation part of the program? And then my follow-up question to that is, how does a hospital know when they should engage you for a conversation about this? Like, what would be some of the things, if I'm listening to the show right now going, oh, that cost aware program sounds interesting. Like, what would qualify me to reach out to you and say, can you tell me more about that? What would I be thinking about?
So this program was created like outside of our typical services. Our typical services supporting hospitals in their cost savings goals, initiatives, analytics, just all kinds of cost projects, right? And so this was kind of created outside of that because years ago, I had seen a presentation from a company that came in and talked about the marketplace from the revenue side. And I thought it was a really great presentation, and we love growth. Everybody loves growth, innovation, new markets. And really that was what the presentation was about. And it's super exciting. And in my back of my head, I thought, well, we need that same version of that for costs, right? And, it doesn't make sense to grow. I mean, growth is important, expansion is important. All those things are strategic. But if you're growing a service line that has a negative margin or a minimum margin, or not capturing all those opportunities for that new growth, it seems like that's misplaced a little bit, right? It doesn't seem like it's as useful as it could be. It's optimization versus innovation. Both are important, but I would rather have my spend optimized before I decide to grow, to be growing a negative problem. So this program is meant to be added as, let's say, we now do it virtually, but is meant to add as a part of, could be a monthly leadership meeting they have. And it's about 90 minutes. And it is, we've got a great deck and information, and we make it also somewhat interactive. So it's separate, right? It's a pure education. It's meant for educational purposes. And so someone would know that they needed that, I believe, they see their costs increasing, or they're feeling like there's not a lot of opportunities, or they're feeling like there's maybe not a lot of support, or they just want to rally the team. They want to have a great kind of team meeting. And this is a great way to make it educational. So I think that's the first part of your question, versus an organization that might bring us in for a cost savings initiative. And I think it's around a couple of things. I think if you're seeing some of those budget areas increasing, if they have a big contract coming up and they want to hitting it out of the park, right? We come in, we work together, but if they've got a big contract coming up, whether that's on the cost side or even as we support data analytics on the managed care side, if they want someone to come in to analyze the data, benchmark, give them a strategy, and provide negotiation services. Sometimes we have hospitals that, I give them a lot of credit. They just want us to help with negotiation. They want us to be there with them behind the scenes, together with them. And some of the biggest organizations hire in business, they hire a negotiation team, because you want a team of people. If you're negotiating a multi-million-dollar contract, some of these contracts are 8 figures over the course of years. And if a hospital has a plan for the future and they really want to gear up, and they kind of want to look at their costs now to maybe be part of that funding, it's another great opportunity. And I think second opinions really matter. We talk about in our next episode, reasons why. Thank you for asking that question.
So if someone is interested in that presentation that you do to leadership on hospital costs, should they just contact you directly?
Yes.
Awesome.
We're going to be talking about it more in the marketplace and social media. And it's kind of been a little bit under the radar to our current clients. And we've written about it a little bit, but we've gotten great feedback. But it's a great way to rally around a topic and for everyone to be aligned. And I think the subject that keeps on coming up for us at the topic, I didn't know that, Lisa. It's a great point. My thinking's been shifted. And that's the nice part about it, because the giving education from, in some cases, we pull information from JAMA, from studies, and we're giving a lot of factual, deep research, right? This isn't like Lisa Miller coming out and putting together a framework. And we do have a framework, but it's built on tremendous research. And we pull it together, and they really enjoy it. And it does become a shift in the way they think. So hence, why we're talking about cost aware for patient care, because this is all about patient care. Just because you're looking for cost savings doesn't mean it has to impact patient care. In fact, it's the opposite. These initiatives are meant to increase the quality of care, increase services, expand services. So as we look at these 7 skills you'll need for margin improvement, number 1 is open communication. It's the ability not to have an employee suggestion system, right? An idea, where people write down ideas, which are great. I think those things are good, but it's linear, it's flat, it's typically one way. But when you have an open communication, that's the ability for somebody who's working to clean the rooms to be able to feel confident enough to say, I have an idea, could I reach out to someone from finance? Because I want to understand how I can put this together. I mean, how comfortable is the organization with somebody who'll be cleaning the rooms to reach out to finance and maybe their department director not getting upset because they did that or afraid of what they'll look like because they didn't bring it up. Who knows? Do we have the ability to really have everyone engaging? Everyone is on the same value. I love that show, Undercover Boss. So on my list of things to do is to write more about this undercover boss and the parallels or the opportunities for hospitals. So wouldn't it be amazing if a hospital CFO or CEO went undercover and worked in food services or EVS? I've seen where they've kind of little bit where a CEO might do a job for an afternoon, because I've seen some of it on social media, which is really cool because I think that the CEO even just putting themselves in that place to, clean a room, to serve food or to do transport is awesome. But what if they did it that they were completely undercover, right? The CEO said, I want to do transport services for the day. I want to understand, because transport will allow them to see really the whole hospital, but do it undercover. What would happen? Like, what would they hear and see? What would they talk about? Like, what would those transport professionals or employees say about their leadership opportunities? I would love to see some of the leadership kind of do an undercover boss in healthcare and see what would happen.
That would be really cool. I bet they would learn a lot.
Yeah, they would learn a lot because the idea is that they are seeing things on the front lines, but they're talking to frontline people that don't know who they are. And they're doing it in such a way that they are going to garner just amazing insights and opportunities and hear, like, do we have an open communication? What's going on there? So there's just a lot of cool ways that you could have open communication, but that's number one. Number two is the idea around observation. So observation is really important. Two people can be sitting at the same location and observe two different things, right? And so you almost want to be aware of what you're observing. There's an exercise that I've done. It's actually a video in one of Tony Robbins' business mastery programs where he tells everybody, puts a video up and there's two different teams and he tells them, okay, count how many times the ball's passed from the people in the white shirts to the yellow shirts. So everyone's counting how many times it's passed. And so everybody's like 4, 7, 18, 15, whatever number. And there is a number. And he does it again. But what people miss is there's a gorilla that walks through the people passing the ball. And most people miss the gorilla. And he stops. He goes, who saw the gorilla? Like there's literally a gorilla costume, someone in a gorilla costume walking through and people miss it.
I've seen that video. It's crazy that you actually are so focused on one thing that you miss the bigger picture. That's such a great metaphor for why we need to be keen in terms of our observations.
Yeah. I mean, so like, I was putting this together. I'm like, observation. They're going to be like, okay, Lisa, really? So one of the skills you need is observation. Like that's how you begin. And it's yes, because of that gorilla costume story. And they have another video, which is really fascinating. And if anyone's interested, I could kind of point you to where it is, where there's two people doing this, like, magic tricks with the cards, but they're watching it, but what they don't realize, the people take off their jackets, the backgrounds change and all the things they do. And you don't see it to the second video. And they were seeing them change their shirt or take their one top off. And now they went from a black shirt to a white shirt. The scenery changes. And it's true, like observation is so important. And, the reality is you can train or educate about slowing down to be able to observe, be aware, look for opportunities. So that's the second.
Isn't it a Wayne Dyer quote that when you change the things you look at, the things you look at change?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, in preparation, I thought to me, it's so important because we have to choose to be conscious and aware. And, I think you're going to get a different, like you said, different outcome, different reality. So now that we, talked about those two, maybe softer ones, which I think are very powerful. That's why I listed them as 1 and 2. We'll go into some things that people probably have heard of more frequently. And the third is data analysis. And I talk about it a lot because data analysis impacts hospitals everywhere. It impacts the way we analyze outcomes from discharge to readmissions to social determinants of health to managed care to cost. There are probably 100+ different ways that data analytics could be used for healthcare performance. And a hospital really should be having a list of all the things that they are utilizing data analytics for on a regular basis for their outcomes. And I think it's underused or it's used spotty, or there's a lot of assumptions, that are unfortunately being made like, oh yeah, we're doing that. We're analyzing our clinical cost, and maybe some things are redone, or maybe the OR does it sometime. OR data analytics is key to the overall financial success of a hospital. So how are you using data analysis? And it's not the platforms, it's the analysis. What are you getting out of that analytics? In fact, there's probably a lot of platforms you're not using, you should get rid of, and really size down and use tools, that may be agnostic, like Power BI, and pulling in data into a platform like that and really analyzing your data.
Can you give us an example of a data analysis that you did for a hospital that was shocking to them?
Yeah. So I think that the one that comes to mind is there's a lot, but there's one that I think may be useful for everyone. I think, in terms of orthopedics and implant spend, there's been a lot of focus around capitating, let's say, a total knee implant. So capitation means that, there's one price for all the implants for a knee replacement. So you go in, need a new knee replacement. This is a big part of the hospital cost. So they'll capitate it. They'll say, let's say for a high performing knee, and this is arbitrary, it's $3,000, right? High performing knee, it's $3,000. We're going to capitate that rate. That's all inclusive, all in. And everyone's like high-fiving, we got the best rate. Nobody's gotten better rates than us. You know what? We're awesome. And it's great. $3,000, high performing knee, everyone's happy, best in class plus. So then over time, the vendors start, changing things and bringing in a different component into the capitation, right? And so everyone assumes that component's part of the capitation. So they're just using the component. Or that there's been some sort of price adjustment because maybe they've used a revision component, a different component because the patient maybe has issues with their bone or weight or whatever, and the adjustments being made. So we recently had a hospital who they did a fantastic job at their knee implant capitated cost. But what had happened was that the vendor was bringing in a new component, and that component was not included in the capitation, adding $1,400 to the case. And the hospital wasn't aware of it, because they didn't back out the one component. We argued they should get a credit, which they did getting a credit. And so, I would say, call it $700,000 spend. And they had a nice job with the capitation. And you're looking at more than 30% cost savings and a credit, we'll call it like close to $100,000 in credit. And for an organization that, again, running in a negative operating margin, thought that everything was taken care of. In fact, they were like, you don't need to look here. We just did this. It's fine. We have capitation. And we're like, well, it doesn't cost us anything to look at it. Let's just take 12 months data and let's just run the analysis. And they were shocked. They were completely shocked. And I'll give you one more story on that same note. We had a physician who we were doing the same. This is a large health system. And we were getting all the physicians aligned with capitation. And we started talking about revision components, a component that costs more, and how he's using it. He's like, I only use this like 7 or 8% of the time. It's all I use it, very specific cases. And we said, well, actually the data shows that you're using it over 37% of the time. You're using this revision component. He said, what? He's like, he had no idea. Data showed something completely different than what he thought he was doing and thinking he needed. He's like, that's way too much.
Yeah, we assume when we don't have data to support our assumptions, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I feel like sometimes the assumption is so strong, like, nope, you know what, we're not doing that. I'm only doing that little bit. No, we got that covered. And it's pretty interesting to see not just a little bit of variance. Sometimes it's just a huge variance into some of the assumptions that are made. And I think that's the biggest opportunity. Is I often say to my team, sometimes the hospitals, you can take the emotion out of all of this work because the data speaks to the facts, so I don't have to get, how should I say it, worried about what a physician might say or someone might say, or be offended that the contract was just done and there's still opportunity. I mean, the data is going to speak for itself. And, all you can do is you present the data, show the opportunities, but we need to use data a lot more and a less on gut, a less on reactionary, a less on assumptions, because I think that's an important skill. So negotiations, it's such an interesting area because I feel like that's a big untapped opportunity for hospitals. So I want to take a step back. Hospitals, your vendors get trained in negotiations probably once or twice a year. In fact, if you were to Google vendor negotiation or manufacturer negotiation, there are companies that all they do is provide negotiation services for vendors to help them increase their margin. I have those resources. I've been on their site. I've been on some of the trainings. I don't say this to be mean-spirited, or I say this hopefully to awaken and alert people, but hospitals are being out-negotiated every single day by their vendors. And it is, to me, one of the biggest opportunities that hospitals need for margin improvement. Negotiation is, you have entry level, mid-level, advanced. You have people who have been negotiating for the FBI. There's a great book, I Never Split the Difference. I encourage everyone to read it. Once any of my customers tell me, Lisa, just to split the difference will be good, I cringe. I'll do whatever they want. I'll explain why that's not a good idea. And it's not that you want anyone else to lose. It's just not a great strategy. So negotiations require you to have such a solid base of your agreement, pricing, or whatever you're negotiating. It could be managed care, it could be negotiating with physicians, but for you to have a solid platform to know what are the things that are important, what are those drivers, and then to have a strategy. To understand that you probably need a team. You probably need one or two people, but you at least need a negotiation buddy. I mean, if you want to be in a high performing situation, don't ever do this alone. And if you feel like you could do it alone, you're not going to get the best outcome.
It's amazing how people are afraid to negotiate. They're afraid to ask for a better deal. They're afraid, I don't know what it is that makes us human beings uncomfortable when it comes to the actual skill of negotiation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's two things. You have some people, and I think it's the lesser, that just feel that they're just great negotiators. They just feel like they can do it on their own. They don't need anything and they can just negotiate. But the vast majority of people do not like to negotiate, and they're not always truthful about it. They're uncomfortable. Vendors, again, are really skilled. They're doing things like they'll circumvent situations, circumvent to the doctors, to a higher authority. They make it very uncomfortable, or they have strategies like, we're losing money, this isn't fair, this doesn't exist. I mean, they deploy a lot of strategies and it works. And to your point, I don't know what it is, but just the simple ask. I think we do a negotiation training program, and one of the first things we talk about is the biggest problem is that people just don't even want to ask. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's like up there on the list.
Yeah, people are too attached to the outcome. They take it personally if they ask and they don't get what they ask for. And so then they avoid it because the first time they did it, they weren't successful.
It's true. There's a lot of psychology around negotiations and just asking and being okay with getting rejection, or being okay with maybe you get the rejection the first one or two times. I can't tell you how many times that we get no the first time. I'm like, okay, well, we're going to show you. Like, we just didn't pull this scenario number out of thin air, and we're willing to keep this going and back it up and continue. Because you get no does not mean failure in negotiations. That's why having a strategy is so important. But it's a great point, Lisa, about us being uncomfortable with asking. So negotiation training. I've mentioned this before, but there's a study that was done. It was in businesses, I believe it was like the Fortune 1000, and those companies that have a systematic negotiation process versus those who don't, the difference in profitability, I believe it was almost like 14%. So negotiation has a direct correlation with profitability. If you think about all the contracts your hospital has, whether it's on the cost side, the reimbursement side, whether it's with a JV agreement, any contract you have, negotiation can be tied to the profitability or a financial outcome. So the better you become at negotiations and the better you're willing to sometimes slow down, have a plan, want a negotiation strategy, the better your rewards are. Number 5, it's decision-making, critical thinking, and what Keith Cunningham calls thinking time. So it's kind of a combination, but we have to be able to really push back on our own decisions. So if we have a decision we've made, let's say on a contract or a decision on a strategy where we want to go to or present, how willing are you to say, is this the right decision? What if this is wrong? What don't I see? What's the downside risk? How are you able to really question your own decision making? And, what's that process like? And taking some thinking time, it's taking 20 minutes, a pen, paper, and writing down all those outcomes. And am I making the right decision? Are there other decisions I'm not thinking about? Is there something I can add to this decision? But we think that quick decisions are great decisions. And in fact, it's when you really become aware and question your own decisions, then you become a better decision maker.
So true, so powerful. And we live in such a multitasking, distracted time that it is unusual for people to sit and think about their decisions and think about what they might be missing.
Yes. And it'd be interesting what you end up coming with just by having that time and making a list. And it's just like, and what may end up being a correlation or a combination, something different that you might come up with. And so number 6 is project management. This is a skill, being able to plan a project with milestones, put something together. It could be 1 or 2 pages. We use a system called Workfront. We love Workfront. We create our milestones. I can tell you, we have 7 milestones to every project we do. By the time we get to milestone 5, I can tell you that project will complete in X number of days. We have it pretty well mapped out. And you don't have to do that to that level. We're managing so many projects per hospital and outcomes are important. So we want to drive towards rapid outcomes. So we have deployed a system that manages days. Most projects should take 30 days. And that's another thing, it's funny because when we tell a hospital, we tell a vendor, or even some people within the hospital, this happens even recently, we're going to finish this in 30 days. They're like, that's impossible. What you're doing is impossible. That can't be. And I'm like, well, no, we can do it in 30 days. And I'm like, what if we can't? But we've told the vendor this is what we want. Better than it takes 6 months. Why do we accept the vendor's timeline? Why do we accept long timelines? Well, that's not a badge of honor to say this project took 9 months. It's way more powerful to get this incredible outcome than, all right, set it for 30, 45, 60 days. But having a project management system in place is really important. Too many people, again, are just, they're running by the urgent issue of the day, and then they get to a margin improvement opportunity.
That could be a whole other podcast just on project management. Because, I'm sitting here listening and I want to know, what are the 7 milestones? Do you have a system around this? How do you because on my team, my right hand always says to me, process equals profits. And so when you look at processes that are integrated into your project management systems, then it does equal margin improvement opportunities inside of hospitals. It's the same thing. So I think that would be a great episode to unpack further.
I love that. And I think one on negotiation as well. But project management, yes, it took us years to get our process down for project management. And I have to thank Hector Rodriguez, who really doubled down and made us really focus and took that initiative. We had a good process, and he wanted it to be great. And he made it great. And I give him the credit for that. It has been probably one of the leading reasons for our success, having this project management system in place. So I am going to take you up on that. I'm going to do a podcast on project management. And then to wrap up, number 7 is monitoring and measuring. So we've done all this work, right? So we have open communication, we have observation, data analysis, negotiation, thinking time, project management. We do all this work right? We've lined up these 6 major components and the areas that require like a lot of muscle, right? And then project's done. Put it away, put it in the drawer, put the contract somewhere, it's done, or the project away. We got the savings, we got the revenue, we got the engagement, and it's done. And then nobody measures and monitors. So,
or they measure and monitor at the end when it's too late to impact change.
Well, they measure and monitor right before the renegotiation. They go, oh, wait a minute. This is what happened in month 8. And that's exactly what happens is they're ready to re-up that agreement or the analysis or the area, then that's done. So you do all this work, like how much work is spent on getting ideas, getting them in place, getting them approved, getting alignment, negotiating internal, external, data, project management, all that work's done. And then we don't measure and monitor. I speak about measuring, monitoring so much. And funny, and I don't want to bring GPOs back into this conversation, but I am for the moment. Everyone's like, get on the contract. Let's get on the contract. You want to be on our contract. And okay, but who's talking about the discipline of measuring and monitoring to say, hey, look, something's off there, month 6. I can't tell you how many times we work with our clients and we finish a project and then we put in place measuring and monitoring. I mean, not every agreement, because maybe they're smaller and some things can be done, possibly, ad hoc. I think every agreement or every cost should be analyzed. But, we'll come in and, start that month 1. We're like, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not right. And we capture it month 1, or we just see things in month 7, and we capture them in real time. And you think about, it's not cost avoidance, because that would have been a real cost, but we're capturing issues as they're happening, and we're protecting all the hard work everyone did. We're protecting those cost savings. Lisa, you and I talk about cost protection, and then it gives you the opportunity to dig even deeper. If you've got everything you're doing in place, you're measuring and monitoring, now you get to see other nuances that take your savings even further, because you've done all this work, you've measured, monitored, and now you're going to take this to a new level, a deeper thinking, a deeper analysis.
I think people, or maybe you can answer this question. I think people lose sight of the impact on the patient care, the patient experience. They look at these skills in isolation of the impact to patient care. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. We do talk about it, the business side of healthcare, but the reality is this is about patient care, right? So the measuring and monitoring, okay, it's probably another thing somebody has to do, but it is about patient care. It is about the margin. And maybe measuring and monitoring should be one department. And I'm certainly not suggesting that you're adding all these different people, but maybe it is an outsourced function, measure and monitoring. Maybe the top 20 agreements need a completely different approach to measure and monitor and provide the insights going in. I'm telling you, it is remarkable what we see when we are measuring and monitoring for our clients. The things that we're capturing, that would have been a big financial blunder had we not caught that, when you did, Lisa. So it's true. All those things would have a patient impact. And I think that's the problem. We've got to keep on tying those things to patient care, Lisa. You're absolutely right. So as we wrap up, this was a great discussion. I'm very passionate about, when we talk about things that can support patient care. And I love the episode. It's episode number 5 with JJ Peterson on the patient is the hero of the story. I'd encourage everyone to listen. Next week's episode is why engage a healthcare consulting firm for margin improvement. There's 4 reasons why you'd want to do that. You want to do as a second opinion. I've got some great second opinion stories for everyone. Expertise to accelerate margin improvement. The accountability word, which is so important. Actually, I was writing something and titling it, "The Deadline Made Me Do It."
I love that.
So, yeah. And an unbiased opinion, an unbiased review. So that's what we're going to talk about next episode. If you enjoyed the show, I encourage you to please send it to someone you might be thinking you would be interested. If you'd like to get in touch with me about the Cost Aware for Patient Care program, I'd love to talk with you further. Thank you, Lisa. And we will continue the show.
Thanks for having me here. It was great.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Leah. You are listening to my mom's podcast, The Healthcare Leadership Experience.
Hi, this is Fernando. If you would like to speak with my mom, just email her.